the dominoes has fallen. The Toronto Maple Leafs issued a statement last night that they have parted ways with general manager Brad Treliving. I'm joined by Pierre Maguire. Pierre, in some ways, this move seemed inevitable, but it could be the first of many.
I think it is the first of many, and it's great to visit with you on this day, Kyle. I think the biggest thing about it is Keith Pelly couldn't watch this anymore. After what happened with the Austin Matthews situation, no retaliation. After what happened in St. Louis the other night on Saturday night with 13 shots on goal, you could see this thing was floundering. There was no confidence in the marketplace and the people making the decisions. It's very unfortunate. There'll be a lot of finger pointing. There'll be this guy going, that guy going, this guy going. All this stuff doesn't matter anymore. The truth of the matter is this team wasn't built properly. They didn't change the DNA, which is what they told us they were going to do in the offseason. Somebody had to take the fall for it, and it's going to be Brad Treliving the start, but there'll be many more people that take the fall before this is over.
Yeah, perhaps Pierre, that the all that commentary, all that talking in the media about changing the DNA, it was just going to take about a year, and they were going to start it this year. They started it last night because it does seem like if you're going to change the fundamental structure of such an important sports franchise, in many ways, you do really have to start at the top and work your way down.
It's a great point, and you're not being unfair. Look, we've tried our best to be really positive about this group because at the beginning of the year, I was very positive about the group. But
Same.
then when I saw the reaction from the players with the movement of Marner to Vegas and no response from all the guys that had opportunities to take that, whether it was Matthew Nyes, whether it was Willie Nylander, whether it was Austin Matthews, to take the responsibility of not having Mitchell Marner, none of them responded in a good way. Terrible season for Matthew Nyes. Not a good season for Austin Matthews. An unbelievably cranky season for Willie Nylander. Those guys have to be go-to players, and they weren't. And so there's a lot of blame to go around here. Behavior matters, standards matter, and guys' commitment to one another matters. And we didn't see any of that from this Leafs team this year.
Yeah, and it seems like it was hard to explain whether this team had they lost the room from the general manager down, had Berube lost the room. It almost seems more like structurally speaking, the players had not bought into this DNA restructuring, quote unquote, of this team. And they had this general sense that they weren't actually better off this year or even on par with what was happening with this team last year. That was such a good hockey team that fell short. And you look at and I'd like you to talk a little bit about what situation a new GM will eventually come in. They've obviously done this early so that they can start that process and really let it have legs and get the right person in here. What is the next person facing with this hockey team?
A lot of heavy lifting and some serious pain. This is not going to be a quick turnaround. And people can say whatever they want. I'm not going to wear rose-colored glasses here. This is going to be a very arduous, meticulous, if they do it right, operation that's going to take a couple years to get fixed and maybe a little longer. Asset management matters the most. So I'm just going to throw this out there for the fans to understand what I'm talking about. The Marner asset was a huge asset that was mismanaged. Brandon Carlo coming over from Boston, way overpriced. That was an asset that was mismanaged. Scott Lawton coming over for a first round pick from Philadelphia, that was an asset that was mismanaged. Whomever decided that Dakota Joshua was going to be part of that DNA change, they miscalculated on that asset. So just those four assets in particular were mismanaged by the Leafs. That's massive because we're not talking about fourth and fifth and sixth round picks. If you go look at all the stuff that was traded out to get to that point where the Leafs were this year, no good. And the Marner thing from the start, it's the one thing that was really making me mad. We talked about it ad nauseum. They got pushed into that. That's a serious miscalculation by the organization. Serious miscalculation.
Yeah, and it does seem like those calculations that were made in the offseason, they just waited too long. They didn't handle him correctly. He's a
Mhm.
superstar in the league. You don't handle these guys differently. You do have to roll out the red carpet, and you do have to get some feedback from them. That was not done, and you're alluding to some of the moves made during his 3-year tenure. It's not a good resume at all, Pierre. And if you look down this list, the sheer number of draft picks that are now missing off the board in the future for the Toronto Maple Leafs, it's going to make this rebuild so much more difficult.
They also tried to dip their toe into the free agency pool from US colleges. They've miscalculated on a lot of those too. I'm just telling you. And I know all those players really well, really well. And They got work to do. There's some things, and there are a lot of scouts that watch when we're on. Trust me, because I get text messages from them. And I'm just telling you, I hate to run scouts down, but there's been a lot of guys that have not done good work in Toronto, both on the pro side and on the amateur side and on the college free agency side. And they got to fix those things internally. They're going to have to. And it pains me to say that because I don't like it when guys lose their jobs. I've lost my job in the league and it's no fun. It's hard to bounce back. But they got some things they're going to have to clean up internally. Whomever comes in here next, whether it's an in-house hire, an out-of-house hire, whomever it is, whatever the structure is, they got some serious work to do. The player procurement side, the player development side, the American Hockey League side, the East Coast Hockey League side, they got work to do. They got serious work to do.
And they have to manage the superstars they have left to see if they're even going to be mentally on board for what is ahead of this hockey team. It seems like going again through so many of these deals, and this kind of goes back to scouting in a way. All of these moves were made as patch pieces in an attempt to win now, win now. And let's be honest, this team's
Mhm.
window was open before this season. They had, an unfortunate bow out from the playoffs last year, but they were an elite hockey team. They lost to the eventual
Yeah.
Stanley Cup champions and pushed them further than any other team in the playoffs. But now you almost wonder if some of those scouting decisions were influenced by that win now and build on this philosophy as opposed to thinking a little further down the line. And if there was any, maybe some pressure applied to the scouting department with that philosophy, as opposed to building a landscape they could move and have a little bit more movement in the future.
So that's one of the things that needs to be talked about when they do the annual debrief at the end of the year. And I'm sure Keith Pelly's going to host that this year, Kyle. And they're going to have to say, okay, where was the undue pressure brought? Was it brought from ownership? Was it brought from me? Was it brought from Brad? Who was it brought from Craig Berube? Who brought that? That's number one. Number two, how come tactically we were so different from a year ago to now? Well, I'll say one of the things that created a tactical problem was not having Mitchell Marner.
Yeah.
So you've now that's been figured out. That's number one. So we have to make sure we don't make that mistake again. And then you got to figure out why did they give Tanev such a long deal? I would have had Christopher Tanev on my team, but not for as many years as what they gave him because he's an older guy and he was already an injured commodity, but a good player. Again, that's asset management. They're lucky they got Troy Stetcher on waivers. They're really lucky they did because a lot of teams could have taken him. They just didn't pay attention to that. So there's so many things, there's so many things that have to be answered. This debrief should be done meticulously. It should be extremely intense. It should never be leaked. It should be behind closed doors, but it's got to be to the point. And a professional debrief at the end of this year in particular is what matters most to set the train going down the track the right direction. If Keith Pelly wants to be the boss of this team, that's what has to happen.
When would you expect this team to make it clear whether or not Craig Berube will finish his contract with this team and stay around, or how much will a new general manager have say in that moving forward? Like I understand ultimately
Yeah.
they're making a lot of these big decisions, but a head coach is a head coach, and that's a group consensus in all likelihood. And there's been a lot of talk that it might be time for him to go or move on from him because the structure they tried to build didn't work. But when would you expect this team to make it clear what their direction is as far as coaching goes?
Not long after the season's over, I would say pretty quick. I would say they're going to probably be really proactive in their search for a manager here and maybe a different scale of how they're going to build their front office. But I would imagine that Keith would probably, rather than make the new GM the bad guy, Keith probably will end up being the bad guy. And
That
he'll
seems
say,
like the right move.
that's probably the
Yeah.
best way to do it. And then the new GM comes in with a clean slate and says, here's my staff, here's what we're doing. So I would imagine if you're a member of the coaching staff in Toronto, the scouting staff in Toronto, the support staff in Toronto, you're probably on pins and needles because they probably hear the water cooler talk. It's not a fun time. It's a really painful time. That's why I'm trying to tread lightly on this, but I'm also trying to be transparent to our viewers and listeners. There's going to be a change there. And it's just, I think it's going to be done before the new manager's hired because I think they want to keep the slate totally clean for him to come in and put his footprint down.
Pierre, I agree with everything you just said there. Not only that, there's like a necessity for a change that I think is actually probably less reflective of the work Berube did and more reflective of the necessity for this
Yeah.
franchise moving forward.
Yeah.
Real structural DNA change here now. Okay, so that discussed, this news came out just before the Leafs took the ice last night in
Mm.
Anaheim, of course. And it did seem to spark a bit of a response from this team. They took an important point off the board for the Anaheim Ducks, and they, to some degree, played a very rough game and made amends for what happened. And of course, it was none other than the son of Ty himself, Max Domi, getting it done.
Something tells me that Papa probably had a nice chat with Max before that game. I was with Ty last week, by the way, in Pittsburgh. He did an amazing job for the Mario Lemieux Foundation. He was there for 5 days, and I got to give Ty a lot of credit. He really showed up and he competed hard. He was a great guy to have around the camp, so I'm grateful for that, and I know Mario is too. But I would imagine that Ty probably had a little discussion with Max about that whole situation. That never should have happened, and it did, unfortunately. But I think it was handled relatively well last night by the Leafs. The fact they were able to pull that game out of the ditch, especially after the late goal by Carlson to tie it up, says a lot about the guys in the room caring about one another. They just don't have enough to get done right now. You look at it, you can look at their roster. Benny Grew's a nice kid. Grew's a nice kid. He's not a second line center in the NHL, and that's where he's playing right now. I mean, you just got to call it the way it is. I know Jacob Quillen really well. Watched him play at Quinnipiac. Watched him play junior in Penticton for the Penticton V's. He's more of a winger than a center. I mean, so that's kind of where you are right now with your roster. JT's such a pro. There's a lot of good things to celebrate from last night, but the reality is this is not a very good team right now, and they know it, and they're just going to try to grind through the rest of the year.
Won't be a popular opinion, but hats off to Gudis for stepping on the ice last night, injured,
Yeah.
facing the music, and kind of doing what is right. He knew that would be the fate. They all,
Mhm.
if it wasn't discussed during warmups, I would have been shocked, but it just did seem like the right move. And it was good to see the Leafs, of course, actually show that there was still a bit of a pulse as far as protecting your teammates go. Now, you're the players on the ice, and you've seen this change at such a high managerial level. How does that affect their play moving forward? Because I mean, they're really playing out the stretch now, quite literally at this point. But they were commenting on it after the game, and they were being very respectful in their comments, saying we didn't get the job done. And to some degree, that is in fact correct. But you can't get the job done if you're not provided the correct tools.
They didn't get the job done. They let the general manager down. He's the one that empowered them. Whether you're Michelli that came over, whether you're Stevie Lorenz that came over, whether you're John Tavares that got a contract extension, even though you gave him a hometown discount. There's so many guys. Easton Cowan getting an opportunity. There are a lot of guys that could be better. We all know that. They know that. I respect them for saying that. They're going to be playing for their jobs right now. Then it's not so much. Maybe not in Toronto. There might be they're on a natural audition for the rest of the season to try to prove to people that they were not part of the problem, that they're part of the solution, whether it's in Toronto or somewhere else. So I would expect you're going to see them play hard right till the end. The fact is, this is not a hard trip for them. They're in Anaheim, they're in San Jose, then they're in LA. It's California for a week. I mean, it's not that much heavy lifting. Trust me, the travel's not that hard out there.
One final question for you, Pierre. Will Austin Matthews be provided the opportunity to offer input on a new GM and or coach?
I'd be doubtful of that. Maybe on a coach, but I'd be doubtful on that. I not on the managing side. He doesn't know if a player knows who the top general manager candidates are in the league, they're not
He's not
playing
paying
hockey.
attention to, yeah,
They're
then
not
he's not
playing
paying attention
hockey.
to the on ice. Yeah.
And that's part of the problem here with all of this. And I've been through probably 9 or 10 searches as a candidate. Um, Even owners don't always pay attention to the best people. They pay attention to what, the media is saying or what the internet's saying or what, talk radio is saying. Those aren't always the best guy. Like I guarantee you right now, Mike Greer's done a nice job in San Jose. He has. He's done a nice job.
Mhm.
How would his job be if he didn't win the lottery and get Macklin Celebrini? People would be pounding him.
That's
You
it.
take 100 you take 100 points out of the San Jose lineup, they're lower than Vancouver. So I'm just showing you how it works. It's not always the biggest name, it's always the sexiest guy. There are guys out there, trust me. I grew up with a lot of them on the road. There are a lot of guys out there that are really competent, and they'll never get a chance because they're not the slick guy. They're not the big name, but they're more than enough candidates to come in and do this job. They just have to find the right one for Toronto.
Dark days ahead in ahead in Toronto, Pierre, but it does look as though this team is now officially put itself forward as being committed to a complete and total rebuild, top to bottom. Pierre, thank you very much for joining us to discuss this morning on Toronto Sports Rush.
Thanks for having me, Kyle. Great to visit with you.